Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupada Rashatarashatashmar Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Narayan Gosvāmī Maharaj Śrīla Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupada Rashatarashatashmar Bhaktisiddhānta Vaman Gosvāmī Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupada Rashatarashatashmar Bhaktisiddhānta Swami Maharaj Śrīla Prabhupāda Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupada Rashatarashatashmar Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupada Rashatarashatashmar Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Mahabhagavat Śrīla Gaurkishora Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Śrīla Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Ṭhākura Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Śrīla Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Gauḍīya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Padadas Raghunath Shar Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Swarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshada Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Śrīla Haridas Ṭhākura Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gora Mandala Vraja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Bharati Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Yamuna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Shri Uddhava-gīta Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Shri Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura Ki Jai. Sārārtha-darśinī Vritti Ki Jai. Shri Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Gosvāmī Prabhupāda Ki Jai. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Maha Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalai Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yang pravrajantamanupetamapeta-krityam dvaipayano virahakatara ajuhava putreti tanmayataya taravo binedustang sarvabhuta hridayang munimanatosmi Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Shrinvatang svakatha Krishna punya shravana kirtana Hridantasto hyabadrani vidhunoti suritsatam Nashta prayeshvavadreshu nityang bhagavata sevaya Bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki Tavai vasmi na jivami tvaya vina Iti vigyaya radhe tvam nayamam charanantikam Bhaktya vihina aparada lakshaya Kshiptastakama ditaranga madhe Kripa mai tvam sharanam prapanna Vrinde namaste charanaravindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Rohit Radha Krishnanji, Dandavat Pranams, and Dandavat Pranams Madhavi Didi, Hare Krishna. And also Indira Mataji, who will be watching later on. And when their Raseshwari Mataji is finished moving yet. Anyways, let's check back. Alright, so we're reading chapter 4, the nature of fruitive activity. Before I go through chapter 4, let's just go through this book. 1 second, let me just open this up. Okay. In response to Uddhava's heartfelt request, Krishna advised him to embrace renunciation and prepare to leave this world. Seeking guidance on how to best do this, Krishna began his explanations on a variety of topics, focusing in on the glory of pure devotional service. Particularly interesting passages include the instructions of the 24 Gurus, the Bhikshu-gīta, and the Aila-gīta. There is also an exposition of Varnashram Dharma, as well as an explanation of the various constituents of material nature. These profound teachings are famed as the Uddhava-gīta. 24 Gurus. Shukadeva Gosvāmī continued narrating the conversation between Krishna and Uddhava. Krishna confirmed he was indeed leaving the world. He urged Uddhava to embrace sannyas and plan his departure too, since Kali Yuga would soon begin. Uddhava, feeling himself lowly and unqualified, requested an interjection of transcendental knowledge to awaken his natural detachment. Krishna first explained how an intelligent person can observe the world around him and decipher powerful lessons to elevate their consciousness. To illustrate this, he narrated the story of an Avadut Brahmin who was wandering carefree in deep spiritual ecstasy. His name was Devadatta. When Maharaj Yadu questioned him on how he attained such an enlightened state, the Brahman Devadatta replied by delineating the 24 Gurus through whom he received profound spiritual instruction. Some key lessons from these Gurus are below. I'm not going to go through all of these because but he learned lessons from the earth, air, sky, water, fire, moon, sun, pigeon, python, ocean, moth, honeybee, elephant, honey thief, deer, fish, pingala, the kurara bird, child, young girl with bracelets, an arrow maker, snake, spider, wasp. Now we're in the section Entanglement, Liberation, and Pure Love. Shukadeva Goswami continued narrating the instructions of Krishna to Uddhava. All forms of material enjoyment, even to the point of heavenly pleasures, are limited, temporary, and full of duality. In the futile pursuance of such experiences, one degrades himself more and more. The entangled spirit soul begins to journey back to purity after receiving transcendental knowledge from a spiritual master. By cultivating the mood and qualities of a true disciple, following transcendental instructions, and engaging one's propensities within the Varnashram system, one gains release from material entanglement. Okay, so I'm going to read all the translations up to where these 18 verses. The Supreme Lord said, "One who is surrendered unto me should tirelessly practice Vaishnava Dharma as prescribed by me in scriptures such as the Pancharatra. He should also perform his occupational duties according to the system of Varnashram, which is a favorable condition for accepting spiritual life. A transcendentalist should see that because the conditioned souls who are dedicated to sense gratification have falsely accepted the objects of sense pleasure as reality, all of their endeavors are doomed to failure. A sleeping person may see many objects of sense gratification in his dreams, but such things are merely creations of his mind and are thus of no benefit to him. Similarly, one who is asleep to his spiritual identity sees many sense objects in this world, but they are all creations of the Lord's illusory potency and have no permanent existence. One who meditates upon the temporary objects of the senses, therefore, uselessly engages his intelligence. One who has fixed his mind on me, making me his goal of life, should give up activities of sense gratification and should instead engage in the regulated practice of devotional service. On the other hand, when one is fully endeavoring for self-realization, he has no need to follow the scriptural injunctions regarding fruitive activities. One who has surrendered unto me, accepting me as the goal of life, should follow all the rules that forbid sinful activities. One should also try his best to follow all the sub-religious principles, such as those dealing with cleanliness. One should approach a bona fide spiritual master who is intimately related to me and who is thus very peaceful and is non-different from me. A disciple of the spiritual master should be freed from false pride, false ego, and laziness. He should give up all sense of proprietorship over the objects of the senses, even his wife and children, and he should have firm faith and affection for his spiritual master. He should be steady, always desiring advancement in spiritual understanding, and he should not envy anyone and should avoid useless talk. A sincere disciple is equal to everyone. He should remain detached from his wife, children, household, property, relatives, wealth, and so on. Just as a blazing fire is different from the wood it burns to provide illumination, so the knower within the material body is different from the body itself, which is pervaded by the consciousness of the soul. It should be firmly understood that the spirit soul and the body have different characteristics because they are two distinct entities. Just as fire manifested from wood takes different shapes according to the condition of the fuel, the embodied soul enters various material bodies and thus accepts varieties of bodily characteristics. The subtle and gross material bodies are created by the material modes of nature, which are creations of the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material existence occurs when the living entity falsely accepts the qualities of the gross and subtle bodies as being his self. This illusory state, however, can be destroyed by real knowledge. Therefore, after careful consideration, one should approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the cause and effect of everything, while renouncing the false conception that this world is an independent reality. The spiritual master is compared to the lower kindling wood. The disciple is compared to the upper kindling wood. And the instructions imparted by the spiritual master are compared to the wood placed between these two. The fire of knowledge that is produced by the interaction of these three destroys the darkness of ignorance and gives happiness to both the spiritual master and the disciple. By submissively hearing from a bona fide spiritual master, one receives perfect understanding that dispels the illusion of material existence, which is due to the influence of the three modes of material nature. Ultimately, the quest for perfect knowledge ceases when one has become fully satisfied on the spiritual platform. My dear Uddhava, I have thus imparted perfect knowledge unto you. There are other philosophers, however, who arrive at a different conclusion. They say that the conditioned souls should engage in fruitive activities because they are the enjoyers of happiness and unhappiness. There are those who say that conditioned souls should engage in fruitive activities because they are the enjoyers of the happiness and unhappiness that are derived from the results of their work. According to this understanding, the cosmic manifestation, including the time, the scriptures, and the souls, are transforming in a perpetual cycle. Just as the objects of this world are constantly transforming, so knowledge based on such objects is also impermanent and ever-changing. My dear Uddhava, if this philosophy is accepted, There will be no escape from the cycle of repeated birth and death, accompanied by old age and disease, as the living beings accept material bodies that are subject to the influence of time. Although the person who engages in fruitive activities hopes to become eternally happy, it is practically seen that materialists are mostly miserable and only rarely actually satisfied. This proves that the conditioned souls are not independent, nor are they in control of their destiny. When a person is always under someone's control, how can he expect to get anywhere by acting independently? It is observed within this world that sometimes a learned person feels distressed, whereas a great fool may feel happy. Therefore, it is simply a manifestation of false ego to think that by the expert performance of karma, one can achieve happiness. Okay, that's where we read up to yesterday. Haribol, Sudevi Didi. And whoever else is watching. 1 second. Okay. Yadi praptim vighatam cha jananti sukha dukhayo te pyadhana vidur yoga mrityurna prabhavedyata. Even if someone was able to somehow achieve only happiness and completely avoid distress in this life, he still would have to succumb to all-devouring death. Sārārtha-darśinī commentary by Śrīla Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura. Even if one is very learned, he is certainly ignorant of how to stop death. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya commentary by Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī, Gosvāmī Prabhupāda. Although learned people under the influence of the illusory energy of the Lord may display expertise in the field of achieving happiness and avoiding distress, they are still unable to save themselves from the hands of imminent death. Konvarta sukhayatenam kamo va mrityurantike aghatam niyamanasya vadhyasyeva natushtidha. Death is certainly very horrible. Since everyone in this world is just like a prisoner condemned to be executed, what actual happiness can be derived from the objects of this world and the gratification that they offer? Sārārtha-darśinī. If you say that there is happiness before death, the answer is that a man who is condemned to die cannot enjoy the sumptuous meal placed before him. A person who is going to be executed cannot feel happiness even if you give him nice sweet rice or milk cakes, because such things are simply a reminder that he will soon die. Therefore, this belief that wealth and sense gratification can give one happiness in this world of birth and death is herein refuted. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. Can the temporary happiness which is available in this world protect one who knows that he is always under the control of inevitable death? Palatable food offered to a condemned person is not relished by him because of the chilling thought of imminent death. Shrutam cha drishtava dushtam spardhasu yataya vyayai bhavantaraya kamatvat krishi vachchapi nishvalam. The material happiness that is available in the heavenly planets is discussed in the Vedas, but it is simply a royal version of the happiness found on earth. Life here and life in heaven are both polluted by envy, deterioration, and death. Just as a farmer has to contend with many problems while growing crops, such as drought or the attack of insects, similarly, the attempt to become happy, whether on earth or in heaven, is fraught with many difficulties. Sārārtha-darśinī. After concluding that there is no happiness in this world, it is being described that there is no happiness in the heavenly planets as well. The information that there is ample happiness in the heavenly planets is illusory. In heaven, there is arrogance because one person is envious of another's happiness. And there is also destruction when one's accumulated piety is exhausted. As agriculture is troublesome and sometimes unproductive, the performance of sacrifice and other pious acts which award one heavenly residence is ultimately of no avail. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. When the farmer plants his crops, he has to worry about so many potential problems, such as defective seeds, drought, plagues of insects, excessive heat, and so on. Similarly, the attempt to enjoying happiness in this world, whether on earth or in heaven, is accompanied by anxiety due to jealousy, cheating, and so on. When conditioned souls interact, there is naturally competition and envy, because that is the very nature of material existence. Due to the influence of time, no position within the material world is stable. And so, when there are reverses, violence and intrigue, Due to the influence of time, no position within the material world is stable. And so, when there are reverses, violence, and intrigue, when these create disturbances, both here... Oh, God. I think that the sentence is not edited properly. Okay. So when there are reverses, violence and intrigue create great disturbances, both here and in heaven. Sorry, every now and then I have a difficult time reading a sentence. There is no situation, no position within this material world that is stable. And so when there are reverses, then violence and intrigue create disturbances, both here and in heaven. Even the attempt to attain a heavenly destination is also fraught with many difficulties. Therefore, one should inquire about the eternal abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is far beyond the disturbances of this material world. Antarayar avihito yadi dharma svanushtita tenapi nirjitam sthanam yatha gacchati tachrinu. Even if one properly performs Vedic sacrifices and fruitive rituals without committing any mistake or offense, the result of attaining the heavenly planets obtained by such activities will be destroyed in due course of time. Listen as I now explain this to you. Sārārtha-darśinī. Even if one avoids mistakes and offenses while performing Vedic rituals, it is impossible to avoid the miseries felt at the time of destruction. This is being described in the following 5 verses. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. Unless one very carefully executes religious rituals, various obstacles will come in his way. But even if one is able to perform such rituals properly and without encountering any obstacles, the result obtained is temporary, because whether good or bad, all material conditions are imperfect. Ishtveha devata yagyai svarlokam yati yagika bunjita devavat tatra bhogan divyan nijarchitam. Pious people attain the heavenly planets by worshipping the demigods with the performance of Vedic sacrifices. By means of their accumulated piety, they enjoy heavenly pleasures, just like the demigods. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. The demigods award their worshippers their desired goals. People who perform Vedic sacrifices to please the demigods attain the heavenly planets as a result of their worship, and thus enjoy heavenly pleasures. Such enjoyment, however, is temporary, and the worshippers of the demigods have to return to earth after exhausting their pious merit. Hare Krishna Sharmaji. Swapunyo pachite shubhre vimana upagiyate kandarvar viharan madhye devinam hridya veshadrik. After ascending to the heavenly planets, one who had previously performed numerous sacrifices will ride in an effulgent celestial chariot, which he is awarded as a result of his past pious activities. He is glorified by the Gandharvas and dressed in gorgeous clothing as he enjoys life in the company of the heavenly damsels. Sārārtha-darśinī. The word Devi in this verse refers to the Apsaras, the celestial women. Stribhi kamagayanena kinkini jalamalina Kridana vedatmapatam surakrideshu nirvritam. In the company of celestial women, the enjoyer of the results of sacrifice travels to the heavenly gardens in a wonderful airplane, which is decorated with circles of tinkling bells and which moves according to his desire. Being relaxed, comfortable, and happy in heavenly pleasure gardens, he does not consider that he is exhausting the results of his previously acquired piety and will soon fall down to the mortal world. Sārārtha-darśinī. The phrase Kamayana means traveling at will in a celestial airplane. Tavat somodate swarge yavat punyam samapyate kshina punya patatyarvag anichan kalachalita. For as long as his pious merit remains, the performer of sacrifice enjoys life in the heavenly planets. When his pious merit is exhausted, however, he falls down from the pleasure gardens of heaven, being moved against his will by the force of eternal time. Sārārtha-darśinī. Being driven by time, he once again falls down to this planet of birth and death. Yadda dharma rata sangar astam vajitriyendriya kamatma kripano lubdha straino bhuta vihimsaka pashuna vidina labhya preta bhuta ganam yajan narakan avasho jantur gatva yatyulbanam tama karmani dukodharkani korvande hinatai puna deham abhajate tatra kim sukam martya dharmina. If a person engages in sinful activities, either due to bad association or his unwillingness to control his senses, he will certainly become mad due to having desires that are impossible to fulfill. Such a person hardly cares for others, is very greedy, and is always seeking the opportunity to enjoy the bodies of women. When the mind is contaminated in this way, one does not hesitate to commit violence, and thus he slaughters poor animals for the satisfaction of the tongue. Sometimes worshipping ghosts and spirits, such a bewildered person is not better than an animal, and after death he goes to hell, which is a manifestation of the darkest mode of material nature. Receiving a hellish body, he continues to perform horrible activities that ensure his future misery. What happiness can there be for one who engages in activities that culminate in death? Sārārtha-darśinī. There are two classes of those who perform karma, the pious and the impious. After describing the destination of pious persons, the destination of impious persons is now being described. One who is not self-controlled is certainly lusty, and such a person afflicted by lust becomes very miserly. Such a greedy person who is overwhelmed by the thirst for material enjoyment becomes henpecked due to being addicted to enjoying sex with women. He performs animal sacrifices that are opposed to the principles of religion to fulfill his insatiable desires. The phrase ulbanamtama refers to the non-moving living entities such as trees. Such persons who are engaged in fruitive activities never achieve tangible happiness. This is the conclusion of these verses. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. Impious people engage in irreligious activities. Becoming addicted to sinful activities, they are intemperate, lusty, miserly, greedy, henpecked, and violent, either due to the association of other sinful people or due to being unable to control their senses. Such impious persons indulge in unrestricted sexual enjoyment. They slaughter countless animals for the satisfaction of their tongues, and they try to forget their miseries by means of intoxication. In this way, they transgress all prescribed rules and regulations. Eventually, such persons become influenced by ghosts and spirits, who deprive them of all ability to discriminate between right and wrong. Losing all sense of decency, they become fit candidates for entrance into the darkest modes of material existence. Those who are ignorant of the glories of devotional service engage in fruitive activities with a desire to enjoy the flickering pleasures of sense gratification. As a result, when the duration of life comes to an end, they are transferred to another body to enjoy or suffer the results of their past fruitive activities. Considering all this, one should never aspire for material happiness. Material life is so horrible because no matter what one's duration of life might be, one will still always be afflicted with fear of death. Even Brahma is afraid of death, and so what to speak of us, who live for no more than 100 years? Considering this, what possible happiness can there be for the conditioned souls? Lokanam lokapalanam marbhayam kalpajivinam brahmanopi bhayang matto dviparardrapayayusha. In all the planetary systems, from the heavenly planets down to the hellish planets, even the demigods who live for 1,000 yuga cycles, and even Brahma, who lives for two parardras, are afraid of me in my form of time. So the demigods who live for 1,000 yuga circles, and Brahma, who lives for two parardas, they are both afraid of me in my form of time. Sārārtha-darśinī. One may imagine that the heavenly planets and the pleasure experienced there are eternal, but this is being refuted in this verse. Neither the heavenly planets nor its rulers are eternal. Even Brahma is afraid of the Supreme Lord. This is stated in the Vedas. Bhishasmad vatapavate Bhisho deti surya. Bhishasmad agnishandrascha mrityurdhavati panchama. It is out of fear of the supreme Brahman that the wind is blowing. Out of fear of him that the sun regularly rises and sets, and out of fear of him that fire acts. It is only due to fear of him that Death and Indra, the king of heaven, perform their respective duties. That's from the Taittiriya Upanishad 2.8. From this statement, the supreme authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is clearly established, and the belief that Brahma is the Supreme Person is refuted. Gunasrajanti karmani karmani guno. No, what am I doing wrong? Gunasrajani karmani gunanusrijate gunan jivastu gunasangyukto bhunkte karma phalanyaso. It is the material senses that perform pious and sinful activities. It is the three modes of material nature that inspire the senses to engage in fruitive activities. And it is the living entity who enjoys the fruit of his karma with the help of his senses. It was Sārārtha-darśinī. It was previously described how sinful living entities are degraded to a hellish condition of life. Now the question may arise as to whether the living entities are helpless or if they are the master of their own destiny. The answer is that it is the senses that worship the demigods and perform other ritualistic activities. It is the senses that enjoy intimate association with another's wife, and perform other abominable acts, thus creating the destiny of the living entity. It is due to being impelled by the three modes of material nature that the senses create one's future body. Minute independence of the living entity consists of how he chooses to associate with the modes of nature. It is in this way that the living entity experiences suffering or enjoyment of his pious and sinful acts. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. According to the Bhagavad-gīta, one's activities are impelled by the three modes of material nature. As long as one thinks himself to be a doer of activities, he remains on the platform of the false ego. Until one comes to the platform of self-realization, he continues to experience lamentation and illusion. The conditioned soul can be liberated if he gives up his separatist mentality and engages in the devotional service of the Lord. When one is under the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is removed from the disturbing influence of the external energy of the Lord. By the perfection of devotional service to the Lord, one realizes his original identity of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, so that he goes to reside in Vaikuntha, the eternal abode of the Lord. Yavat syar gunavaishamyam tavan nanatvam atmana nanatvam atmano yavat paratantram tadaivahi. As long as the living entity remains under the control of the three modes of material nature, he will attain various forms of life, such as a demigod, an animal, and so on. As long as the living entity remains in the bodily concept of life, thinking himself to be the doer, he will have to experience the good and bad results of his karma. Sārārtha-darśinī. When the living entity is forgetful of his relationship with Krishna, he considers this material world as ultimate reality. Thus he wanders among various species of life, sometimes as a hog, sometimes as a bird, and sometimes as a demigod. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. While considering himself to be the doer of activities, the conditioned soul tries to wander through varieties of material bodies, one after another. In such a condition of life, one is incapable of understanding that behind this temporary manifestation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless one is situated in his constitutional position as the eternal servant of the Lord, one will remain falsely proud of being the proprietor of all he surveys, and he'll feel himself the performer of heroic activities. In the human form of life, the conditioned soul may begin to worship 5 demigods for the fulfillment of his material desires. In such a situation, one thinks of the material world, which is a creation of the Lord's external energy, as being an object of his own enjoyment. Yavarasya svatantratvam tavarishvarato bhayam ya etat samapasirangste muhyanti shucharpita. Haribo, Bhavatarani Mataji and Hari Prabhu, Dandavat pranams to both of you, and also Ganga Mataji. Hare Krishna. Yavarasya svatantratvam. Oh, I just read that. Sorry. As long as the living entities remain dependent upon fruitive activities under the control of the modes of nature, they will continue to fear, because I am the giver of the results of karma. Those who accept the material concept of life, taking this cosmic manifestation to be factual, will devote themselves to material enjoyment, and therefore remain absorbed in lamentation and illusion. Sārārtha-darśinī. Here, the Supreme Lord chastises those who say that the path of material enjoyment is auspicious. Those who praise the performance of fruitive activities are themselves tormented by lamentation and illusion. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. The living entity is trapped in a network of illusion. Even if he can understand that he is dependent upon someone superior, he is not inclined to serve the Supreme Lord. This causes him to suffer in so many ways, however. Dreaming of sense gratification, the conditioned soul always fears the destruction of the arrangements he has so carefully made.
simply engaged in trying to perfect his eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and thus exploiting material nature, he glides down to the lower species of life. Maya has two potencies, the covering potency and the throwing potency. When one is covered by Maya, he forgets his original consciousness, so that she throws him into the darkness of ignorance. When one foolishly thinks that he is independent of the Supreme Lord, he becomes enamored by temporary material objects, hoping to enjoy sense gratification. The result is that when a person grows older, his life becomes filled with fear and anxiety. A conditioned soul falsely considers himself to be in control of his life. But because he is not in control, he is forced to suffer against his will. Truthfully, material life is abominable. It is only due to illusion that we think it to be satisfactory. Kala atma gamo loka sabhava dharma evacha itimam bahuda prahur guna vyati kare sati. Due to the interaction of the three modes of material nature, the conditioned souls describe me in various ways as the time, the soul, the religious principles, the universal form, one's own nature, and so on. Sārārtha-darśinī. According to some opinion, the material nature, time, the scriptures, and the soul are eternal. The word svabhava means nature, which is attributed to a conditioned soul. When the three modes of material nature cover the intelligence of the living entity, he considers the form of the Lord as a creation of Maya Shakti. This misconception can be removed by the will of the Lord, and thus everyone should strive to get freed from the bondage of karma and engage in the devotional service to the Lord. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. When the intelligence of the conditioned soul is covered by the external energy of the Lord, he forgets the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In such a condition, people refer to him as time. Some refer to him as the Vedic literature. Some refer to him as nature. And some refer to him as religious principles. In this way, various fragmental understandings of the potencies of the Lord are understood. Shri Uddhava-uvacha Guneshu vartamanopi deha jeshva napavrita kunarna baddhate dehi baddhate va katam vivo. Shri Uddhava said, "My dear Lord, the souls of this world are conditioned by the three modes of material nature, and thus they experience the happiness and distress that results from the activities performed under their direction. How can the conditioned souls be considered as independent? One can argue that the living entity is spiritual in nature, and thus has nothing to do with this material world. If this is the fact, then how has he become bound up by material nature? If this is a fact, then how has he become bound up by nature?" Sārārtha-darśinī. It appears to ordinary people that even liberated souls also eat, sleep, walk, talk, and perform other similar activities, just as they do. Considering this, how can it be said that a liberated soul is not bound by his gross and subtle bodies, which act under the direction of the three modes of material nature? It may be questioned that if the soul is like the sky in that it never mixes with anything, then how did it become conditioned by material nature? Uddhava presents such arguments just to clear up the understanding of actual spiritual life. Uddhava presents such arguments just to clear up the understanding of actual spiritual life. Sorry, guys. Actually, I'm going to stand up. I'm starting to... Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. Conditioned souls under... Sorry. Oh, 1 second. Uh-oh. Um, 1 second, I just need to... No, that's not going. I have to unplug. Okay, I'm back. Thanks, Tessa. Okay, Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. Conditioned souls under the influence of the three modes of material nature describe the absolute truth as non-existent, or as possessing material qualities, or being devoid of all good qualities, or as being a neuter object like a eunuch. How can a spirit soul, who is now conditioned by the modes of nature, be freed from the bodily concept of life? If the transcendental spirit soul is never actually touched by Maya, then why is he referred to as conditioned? These are the last two verses of the chapter. Katam varteta viharet karva gyayeta lakshmanai kem punjito tavit visrijech chayita sitayativa etara chutame bruhi prashnam prashna vidam vara nitya baddho nitya mukta eka eveti me brahma. O Achyuta, the living entity is sometimes described as eternally conditioned, and at other times as eternally liberated. Because of this, I am not able to understand the actual situation of the living entity. My Lord, you are the best of those who are experts in answering philosophical questions. Please explain to me the symptoms by which one can tell the difference between a living entity who is eternally liberated and one who is eternally conditioned. In what ways are they situated, and how do they enjoy life, eat, evacuate, lie down, sit, and move about? Sārārtha-darśinī. Uddhava says, as long as the living entities identify themselves as products of matter, they continue to remain conditioned by the illusory energy. As soon as they are free from this misconception, they become liberated from material bondage. If this is a fact, then how can I recognize who is liberated and who is conditioned? Uddhava goes on to say, both liberated and conditioned souls eat, pass stool and urine, sleep, sit, walk, and talk. How can I recognize who is performing these activities under the direction of the modes of nature, and who is acting free from Maya's influence? Personalities like Dattatreya and Bharat were eternally liberated souls, whereas Devadatta and Yagyadatta were eternally conditioned souls. Since their bodily activities appear similar, I am confused, being unable to differentiate between them. Therefore, please tell me how one can recognize an eternally conditioned soul and an eternally liberated soul. Gauḍīya Bhāṣya. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 20, verses 109 and verse 117, it is stated, Jīvera swarupa hoy Krishnera nitya das, Krishnera tatastha shakti bedha ber prakash. It is the living entity's constitutional position to be an eternal servant of Krishna, because he is the marginal energy of Krishna and a manifestation simultaneously one with and different from the Lord. Krishna bhuli she jiva anadi bahirmukh ataeva maya tare deya sangsara dukh. By forgetting Krishna, the living entity has become materialistic since time immemorial. Therefore, the illusory energy of Krishna is giving him different types of miseries in material existence. Conditional and liberated, both these states are adjectives. These two natures, when seen from two different angles, are known by two different names. According to the difference in the difference in the propensity of service, the conditioned and liberated states are ascertained. When one is manifested, the other disappears. Thus ends the translation of the 4th chapter of the Uddhava-gīta, entitled The Nature of Fruitive Activity, with the commentaries of Srila Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura and chapter summaries and purports by Srila Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura. Alright, so in chapter 5, we're going to read about the symptoms of conditioned and liberated living entities. I think this is a long chapter. Oh, Haribol to say Shri Mataji. Oh, you're driving with no reception. Oh, right. At the beginning of the class, I was wondering if you're still moving or what was going on. All right, so let's see how long. I'm just checking out what tomorrow's chapter, how long it's going to be. Tomorrow, next chapter, it'll take us 3 days to get through chapter 5. It's 14,379 words. All right. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharika Giridhari, Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju ki Jai, Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju ki Jai, Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashrata Rashata Shishimar, Bhaktivedanta Narayan Gosvāmī Maharaj Śrīla Gurudev ki Jai, Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashrata Rashata Shishimar, Bhaktivedanta Vaman Gosvāmī Maharaj ki Jai, Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashrata Rashata Shishimar, Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Śrīla Prabhupāda ki Jai, Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashrata Rashata Shishimar, Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosvāmī Maharaj ki Jai, Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashrata Rashata Shishimar, Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Gosvāmī Prabhupāda ki Jai, Nitya Lila Pravishta Maha Bhagavat Śrīla Gaurkishora Babaji Maharaj ki Jai, Nitya Lila Pravishta Śrīla Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Ṭhākura ki Jai, Nitya Lila Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Śrīla Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki Jai, Shri Rupa Nagogoriya Guru Varga ki Jai, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhattadash Raghunath Śrāda Gosvāmī Prabhu ki Jai, Shri Swarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki Jai, Namachay Śrīla Haridas Ṭhākura ki Jai, Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai, Shri Kshetra Mandala Gora Mandala Braja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki Jai, Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj ki Jai, Shri Radha Kund Shama Kuni Munaganga Tulsi Bhakti Devi ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai, Samagata Gaurva, Shri Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Shri Uddhava-gīta ki Jai, Shri Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura ki Jai, Sārārtha-darśinī vritti ki Jai, Shri Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Gosvāmī Prabhupāda ki Jai, Gauḍīya Bhāṣya ki Jai, Shri Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai, Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashacha Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat pranams everybody. I'll see you all tomorrow. The next Tithis coming up is in 4 days from now is Srila Bhakti Kumud Santa Goswami Maharaj's appearance day and Shri Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj's disappearance day. And in 5 days from now is the disappearance day of Shri Abhiram Thakur. And 7 days from now, Shri Keshav Vrat begins, and it's also the disappearance day of Srila Bhakti Vallabha Tirtha Goswami Maharaj. And in 8 days from now is the disappearance day of Srila Vrindavan Das Ṭhākura. Alright. Hari Bol, everybody. See you all tomorrow. Jai Shri Radhe.